Hello, I'm Oscar Watson, and this is a walkthrough of the Open Character Builder from Driven into Darkness. The first step for creating a character is to establish their profession and origin. Professions and Origins was inspired by old-school RPGs that forego long and detailed skill lists in favor of relying on the creativity of the player and the GM in the use of the core attributes. Professions and Origins allow the player to position themselves narratively to argue for bonus dice on checks related to their origin and profession. In specific, a profession is a set of skills that the player can creatively draw from within the concept of their profession. For example, if a player was a cut purse, they could argue for bonus dice related to pickpocketing and other criminal activities. Origins work in the same way as professions, but are presented in a different way. Rather than being presented as the player's way of sourcing income, or as a set of skills trained over a long time, an origin is the backstory, cultural heritage, and upbringing of a character. The player then positions themselves narratively to gain bonus dice related to the experiences they've had within their backstory. Whether or not part of their backstory has prepared them to overcome the obstacle in front of them now. There's no list of example professions and origins that I have within the text. I believe that any attempt I could make at making a master list of such things would only limit the creativity of players and GMs in coming up with their own professions and origins, and the ways that they would apply them in solving the problems they come across. The next step in creating a character is to establish their rule statistics. Statistics are not generated randomly in Driven to Darkness. Rather, the players choose where to distribute their statistics themselves. The 6 stats begin at 0. Neither are positive or negative to checks made with those stats. A player can adjust a stat upwards as long as other stats are adjusted downwards to compensate. The maximum a stat can be adjusted upwards is to +4, and the minimum is -7. Once the origin and profession have been chosen and the stat distribution decided, players are granted between 3 and 12 experience, depending on how powerful the GM and players want their characters to be at the very beginning. Once the group decides the amount of experience they wish to begin with, the players go ahead and spend that experience on the options listed on page 6 and 7. Options including increasing the character's health, unlocking magical power, choosing the types of equipment disciplines they wish to obtain, gaining additional languages, additional professions, obtaining a trait, as listed on pages 12 to 15, or simply increasing their raw stats by 1 per experience spent. The spending of experience is the core of the Open Character Builder. The system was inspired by games like Wrath and Glory, and the way characters are constructed in games like Pathfinder. Where it differs from those games is that I intended to make it as simple as possible to understand. Excluding obtaining the all armor discipline and unlocking magic power, all other experience expenditures only cost a single experience, every trait, every increase, costing only 1. The purpose of such a system is not only to have it be easy to understand, but also grant any character the ability to organically grow throughout the progress of the story. Spending experience in the ways that align with the current threats and problems facing the players, by not being restricted or punished by the game's mechanics for not remaining within your rigid role set out at the beginning. After the characters have spent their experience and defined their role within the group, they next choose the equipment they wish to start with at the beginning of the game. All characters can begin with a set of armor, a shield, and up to 4 weapons. Although the armor and weapons they can start with are based on the disciplines that they chose when they were spending their experience. If a character got all armor, for example, they could choose to start with heavy armor or light armor, whereas characters that chose to be martially disciplined can begin with martial weapons. Armor grants a bonus or sets a minimum to the character's dexterity defense modifier. Dexterity defense being the most common type of defense rolled within the game, whereas the differentiation between simple and martial weapons is an increase or decrease of the weapon's base damage. Weapons themselves do not come within a predetermined list. They are instead constructed by the player based on a set of weapon properties. The properties chosen either increasing or decreasing the weapon's base damage in order to take on the properties, such as a weapon having long reach or having the ability to be thrown. Players then have the ability to customize and visualize their weapons in whatever way fits their character concept best. The last and most simple step is to have the character roll for their provisions. To determine the number of provisions that a player starts with, they simply roll a d20 plus or minus their highest mental stat, that being intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. Provisions themselves are a replacement of the regular sorts of adventuring gear type mechanics that are found in other games. Inspired by the supplies mechanic in 5 Torches Deep, provisions differ by, rather than having them replace items that you've already written down on your sheet, they themselves can produce an item that you did not know you even had. For example, a character finds a stuck door and they say, "I have a crowbar," and the GM says, "Okay, you have a crowbar minus one of your provisions." Provisions are most commonly used when the players must eat or drink during long journeys, or players use them to heal health and status effects as you would with potions in other games. Provisions can then be reacquired by rolling a different check at a different time when the GM deems it possible for the players to resupply on provisions, or when they find a destroyed cart on the side of the road. The stat used to roll for provisions is decided by the players and GM depending on the situation they are in. The main benefit to having provisions function like this is that they are both useful in the heat of combat and useful for problem solving outside of combat. In addition, it encourages creativity while also removing any tedious bookkeeping on the character sheet. After playing and reading games like Morkborg and Blades in the Dark, where the process of character creation is rather quick, taking pretty much less than 20 minutes if you're familiar with it, I get really frustrated these days when a character's creation process starts to take a bit longer than that. It's sort of like something within me now, this level of impatience that I didn't used to have, where I'm sort of just like, get on with it, that like all these little extra bits, all these tiny little things, I'm not going to need so much of this. So much of it just feels so ancillary, and kind of part of the goal of creating this character builder was to pretty much strip it as far as I could go without removing the kind of complexity that I enjoy, the kinds of interesting maneuvers that can be done in games like 5e and Pathfinder, in games like Wrath and Glory, where there's lots of interesting little unique quirks that your character has. Not to go entirely strip bare OSR style, where the kinds of things you can do are only truly limited by imagination and the whims of the DM, to have that kind of mechanical support for interesting characters while still leaving it open to creativity to at least a much more of a degree than games like 5e and Pathfinder would allow you to do, and to especially not over analyze or over describe any part of the character creation process. Give people ways to interpret it that I might not interpret it myself. If you want to support me, even just send me feedback. The game is free on itch.io and TTRPG. If you want to talk to me about it, you can email me or contact me through my Twitter. And if you do play it, I hope you have fun. If you do just read it or take a look at it, I hope it seems interesting to you. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.